our friends from the Jamaica Information Service and PBCJ. To the journalists here this morning, thank you very much for making it, and welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister. And to you, our viewers, thank you for joining us for another post-cabinet press briefing. We'll now go to the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton, who has a presentation. Dr. Tufton.
Thank you very much, Minister Morgan. Good morning to you all. Okay, so you would have hopefully seen, if not in total, parts of the sectoral presentation made by myself on behalf of the team at the Ministry of Health and Wellness last Tuesday. And so this morning, it really is to emphasize a few of those developments, and then of course to entertain or to accommodate any questions that the media may have, clarity, further explanation, or any additional information. So the theme of the sectoral really was around transformation, and we made a point that transformation is more than just modernization, which I think by all accounts the ministry has been undergoing with, of course, the government of Jamaica, the Honorable Prime Minister and the Cabinet, sanctioning significant increase in budget, over 143% over the 8-year period, from 60 billion to 143 billion. Significant expenditure in capital expenditure as opposed to recurrent expenditure. Significant expansion in the worker corps, both at the nurses, doctors, administrators, community health aides, moving from over 900 to over 2,200, for example, to improve the ratio of population to healthcare worker. Significant expenditure in health centers, expansion, renovation, over 9 billion over the 8-year period, and many taking place. Significant expenditure in hospitals for improvement in hospitals, as well as a number of programs that are or could be characterized as outreach to the population through direct engagement at the parish and community level. So, you know, one could argue about the effectiveness of these things. That is the cut and thrust of how policy debate takes place. We have no issues with that. What cannot be denied is that the government has demonstrated a fair bit of commitment, significant commitment, to the need for healthcare to be resourced in many ways, and for those resources ultimately to benefit the people on the ground. And I wanted just to run through a couple of the areas through a few slides that are here to kind of provide that evidence, and then to say what else needs to be done, because the substance of the presentation was that now that we are here, how do we get real transformation, meaning the impact on the people and the quality of life, or the response to the people, because it's not just about adding resources, it's about making a difference in the interest of people, the people that we serve. So I don't know who's changing the slides, but okay. So we have continued our mission of trying to provide data. And some people may think it's wasted paper. Most of it is electronic. We only printed less. I think we printed about 100 copies, so it's not a lot of paper printing, but it is all available on the website and can be electronically transmitted to mass audiences around. And essentially what that is for us is that people should know what is happening in much more finer detail than we can present in 1 hour. So we tabled those reports: performance highlights, population health status report, secondary care model as part of the changes that we're making to public health. Secondary care, of course, is hospital care. So what does it mean in terms of build out? What does it mean in terms of new doctors, nurses at the hospital level? Last year we tabled a primary care model, which is the health center level. And of course, our vitals, which is our statistics around specific areas, and we focused on maternal mortality. And of course, all of this provides a lot of information. Next. The primary care reform was a highlight. We indicated that Cabinet approved, after much work by the team led by the Office of the CMO, a new primary healthcare model. And that essentially, very summarized format, divided health centers into community, district, and comprehensive, or parish. So we are redefining what a health center represents in 3 categories, and each category will represent the type of services that are offered, the amount of doctors that are there, nurses, curative services, prevention services, public education services, and that again is an attempt at being more engaging at the community level, right sizing based on the needs in the community. So using the statistics basically to respond by a reclassification of those health centers. It's a big push because it means something tangible. So for example, the reclassification means that we're adding 370 new doctors to health centers, which means that more doctors will be in the health centers. It means that we're adding more nurses. It means that we're providing more curative services. So instead of going to the hospital for certain services, you can get it at the health center. It means that there'll be more outreach in communities, visitation in homes and communities. In other words, it's an attempt at making our health center provide greater utility to keep people in the communities as opposed to the crowding out of hospitals for final services. So a lot of detail is in that, and there's a document to support that. So we announced that. Then we further, as part of our transformation theme, announced a program called Operation Refresh, which is what it says. It's an attempt at refreshing our primary healthcare facilities. Everybody knows that refresh suggests. For us, what it means is that we need to restore credibility to our health centers, meaning get more people to stop at the health center before they go to the hospital. More often than not, people in our communities bypass the health center and go straight to the hospital. And it's kind of logical why they would think that way. They think they get a one-stop shop type of approach to the hospital. They go there and that's where all the doctors are, all the specialists are, that sort of thing. So the idea is not just to add more services, but to make the health center as a physical facility in the community look the part, feel the part, and convince people to want to stop there. I know it sounds more like aesthetics than it does tangible, but we're dealing with the tangible in terms of the addition of doctors. We don't want an old broke down building in a community where people think that it's not credible. If they don't look good, people might not want to stop. So we're committing $1 billion over 18 months to improve. Now there are 4 areas of improvement. Did 4 or 3? One is identification of the health center. There are some health centers, when we took office as a government, that you really don't know is a health center when you're passing it in the community. And identification means signage and proper signage. It means adding, well, the name, obviously, the services that it provides, the times that it provides those services are days of the week and times of the day. It means any additional useful information about the health center. So the health center becomes very, very recognizable. It also would, for us, in terms of identification, means a good paint job and a consistency of the look of the health center. So we are exploring color schemes that are in keeping with health facilities. So we're going to try and make our health centers look the same way, no matter where they are in the country, which community they're in. You notice that police stations look the same way. We don't want our health centers to look like police stations. We want them to look like health centers. So it may be a different look. It will be a different look, but you kind of will recognize it wherever it is. There is an issue about weight and the discomfort of weight and we want to address it under the refresh approach. So we're looking at waiting areas where patients come and wait. We cannot prevent wait, and that's something we need to get in the psychic of the people. We can optimize and lessen wait, and we need to always be working on that to get throughput, improvements in throughput. But people have to wait. I mean, it's almost a feature of any health facility, whether here or in the developed world. But we can improve the quality of wait. So what the mandate is for Operation Refresh is to look at all waiting areas and make sure that the improvements of wait, the quality of wait. So what does that mean? It means a good seating for the people. It means using solar panels and air conditioning within the wait areas to create a cooler environment, and that is part of the mandate. It means clean bathroom facilities. So if you want to use a bathroom, you don't have to, and that to us is important. And maybe a little, flat screen TV to give some health education. So that's a mandate as part of that approach. And then there are some basic things that we want to improve for staff. So the community health aides in particular want to zero in on, because they are expected to go out a lot and come back, and we want to make sure that when they come back in, they have a comfortable setting. But essentially, those are the guiding principles of how the resource will be spent. Now, there are some health centers that are already in a very good condition because we spent a lot of money. So it may not take much to put them in that position. There are others that it will take a little more. So the idea is to try and look at between 80 and 100 health centers across the country and spend anywhere from 5, 8, 10 million to 25 or 30, depending on what the needs are. The National Health Fund is driving that process. They are to put together a team to projectize and to manage it, and we want to go very quickly because we think it's part of the mindset change that is necessary for people to go to health centers. The second component of Operation Refresh is the community health aides and the role that they play in communities. When we started as an administration, we had just under 900 community health aides. We now have 2,200 community health aides. Community health aides are critical to primary health care because they are the first point of contact between the patient, normally, and the doctor or the nurse or the health service. They're like the extension officers in agriculture, rather. So what we want to do is a part of the compensation review was to redefine their job description. They do go out now as a routine into homes. We want to do a little more of that. We want to engage them a little more in communities. We want to get them to do a lot more in terms of health education, more in terms of some basic support. I'll give you an example for better understanding. So they may go with a tablet which has information. They may be able to check the blood pressure. If it's high, they can go on the tablet and pull out the things that says, what do you do in terms of high blood pressure? It may be, and we're exploring this, even possible for them to do through digital connection, a remote connection with a doctor from a home. So a geriatric patient, a stroke victim could have a kind of conversation between the location and the doctor's office using the technology. So we want the community health aid to be a pivotal point between the community and I'll be out there with them and the team, and you'll see more and hear more about that. So for us, Operation Refresh is intended to restore credibility or enhance the credibility of our health centers in keeping with the new primary healthcare model. And that includes the physical activity as it does the services that we offer. Next. Okay, so the other element of transformation that we are hoping to target this period is around training and retention. One of the biggest bottlenecks of the health system is retention of healthcare workers. We lose them very, very quickly as we train them. And indeed, it is affecting the quality of service. A lot of times when people wait, they may not know that some of that may be may be linked to not having enough nurses when they're inpatient in hospitals, not having enough people to tend to them, so they have to wait because people have to work overtime and there are shortages and so on. In fact, I will say that we're even impacted right now at the minister's constituency, Chapelton Hospital, where we're offering a 24-hour service. Right now we're going up to 10 for the essential services. It's not because we don't want to go 24, because we have a challenge with nurses. So it is having a real impact on the service level that we would like to offer. So we want to make a big dent on that, and so we came up with this Scholarship and Development Fund, the Barry Wint Memorial Scholarship, for $500 million a year for 5 years. It's a big investment, but we think it's one that's worth it, because we're investing in our people. Because our position is that no matter how much or how many hospitals or health centers you build, no matter how you add services, if the people are not there to combine those services for a service to be provided to the patient, it's not going to happen. And so the idea is to offer these services, these scholarships, for training in particular areas, which is listed on the screen, not just nursing and medicine, public health, medical technology, epidemiology, which is a statistician of public health. They gather all the data. Health records management, hospital care management, information systems for health, pharmacy, dentistry, health economics, and more. Hopefully what this will do is a couple of things. One, it will show the population that we need more than just doctors and nurses to run a hospital. We need the management, we need the people who fix the equipment, who fix the leaking pipes, who understand record keeping, who understand looking at data and managing that for better decision making. It will offer opportunities for those who can't afford to be able to study. They will be bonded, so there's a bonding agreement for them to come back into public health for a period. And it hopefully will begin to address some of the shortages in the system over time. Persons who are currently studying can apply for these scholarships, as well as persons going forward. Now, I didn't say this in the sectorial, but we are planning a career expo later on this year, maybe September or thereabouts, where we're going to be inviting sixth formers and all else who would like to participate, a large career expo focusing on these areas so that we give those who are interested an appreciation for all the disciplines that combine, make up the provision of a service in public health. Because we don't want people to just rush studying to be a nurse or a doctor. Indeed, if they are a nurse, there are several categories of nursing that are important. In fact, there are 8 specialized nursing categories that we are highly short of. Nephrology, operating theater nurse, critical care, ICU. Those are not just RNs. They have to do a specialization in order to work in those areas. And in those areas, the demand is high, both globally and otherwise, and those are the areas which we need to fill. So we're going to be doing some work in the next few months, because this is a medium-term program, 5 years. So if you miss it this time, you have another year, or you have another 4 years, to expose the population and hopefully guide some of our young people towards some of these career choices. And more will be said about that. The other element of this scholarship is that it doesn't necessarily mean studying in Jamaican institutions, although that is highly preferred, where those courses are offered here, because some of those specialized courses may require overseas rotation or otherwise. And so one of the things that we're exploring around this, which is why we call it a development fund as much as it is a scholarship fund, is to tweak the syllabus around how we study for particular areas of specialization. I think the time has come, and we said it, for cross-border collaboration around studies, where you can earn a degree studying in 2 different institutions, sharing faculty, because that's a major bottleneck, lack of faculty, sharing clinical rotation space, because that's another bottleneck, earning a degree that gives joint accreditation, which is unusual, but I think is now right for that. And indeed, we did advocate the flexi-contract concept, which would allow a qualified person who undergoes this kind of cross-border in training and qualification to work in both places. I see no reason why a specialist nurse who can't be trained between two institutions, one here, one overseas, work in Jamaica for a period and work overseas for a period. Indeed, I believe if we gave Jamaicans that choice, more would stay here than would go. The reason why people migrate, my view, based on some anecdotal examination, is that a lot don't have the choice, so they choose to go abroad. When you talk to them abroad, they say, boy, you know, I'd prefer to live in Jamaica, but the economics allow, you know, gives me a better option. So we want to explore that as part of going forward. So what we've been doing is meeting with the institutions. So I met with the University of the West Indies. We're meeting next week, I think, with NCU and UTech, right? To look at what their training is around, because they have to drive it. We play a part, obviously, but I want them to drive it. And I made the call in the sectorial for these institutions to step up to the plate, in a manner of speaking, apply some creative application to how they structure their areas of study, make the adjustment where necessary. This is a different world. Healthcare workers are short. Find the best ways to adjust. We have to bring in the nursing council and the medical councils, and let us come together with an agreement that will lead to more training. But we are providing the fuel for that as Ministry of Health and Wellness and as Government of Jamaica. We are being the catalyst to advocate. We are providing a vision. We need the partners to help us to implement that vision. And that, to me, is the way by which we are going to pull more people in, retain more people, and get the transformational thinking of improvements in productivity and output. That is the ultimate goal of what we're doing in public health. So it's an exciting time, I think, for public health, and an exciting time for those who seek to get involved. And we certainly encourage that to take place. And the government is very committed to this. So we thank the Honorable Prime Minister and the Cabinet for their support around this. Next slide. Okay, I'll run through this very, very quickly, but we've spent a lot on capital expenditure as part of the overhauling. I want to just preface this by saying that if you really think about it, since independence, we really haven't spent a lot on capital expenditure in public health. And that has resulted in a lot of our systems failing, our constant downtime, Cornwall being the elephant in the room as it relates to that. So what we're doing now, frankly speaking, should have been done routinely every year or 2 years in public health. And we're kind of playing catch up. But the government has been committed and remains committed to that. So 970 million, that is a work in progress. All of those projects on the screen are taking place now with their appropriate dollar figure. Next. We are going to be announcing 3 large projects, or relatively large, over the next couple of months, 9.7 million US, 1.5 billion Jamaican. That has gone through the procurement process already. It's the IDB Health System Strengthening Program, GOJ. IDB providing 50 million US, the EU 10, the government of Jamaica, I think, 87. So it's as much a government of Jamaica finance project as it is with our multilateral partner. And the next phase, having announced Spanish Town, which is now under construction, is the 3 major health centers in Old Harbour, Portmore, and the St. Diego Health Center. So we're doing both hospitals and health centers. And these are very substantial, transformational projects. Next. We're doing work, sorry, go back to Clarendon. We're doing work on Clarendon, Moko, Maypen, West Health Centers, design phase, and we're hoping to go to market the 4th quarter of this year. Estimated investment of 600 million. Go ahead, next. 21 hospitals receiving upgrades of different types. That picture there is the Western Child and Adolescent, which is, I'm going there tomorrow. They are now doing internals, so the 8 floors are up, the staff quarters are up, the frame anyway. The front section is up, and they are now doing the internals of the building, which we're excited about. Next. The Cornwall Regional Hospital continues to be a controversial point, and sometimes I think a distraction from all the good that we're doing. I don't have an issue with people raising concerns, because I do agree that this is a project that has taken a very long time, and this is not something that we desire. Indeed, it's something that we regret. But every time we hear a conversation around Cornwall, unfortunately, it lacks context, and it is designed, unfortunately, by some, not all, because some people are genuinely trying to understand, to create a perception which is not the case. And I try to address that in the Parliament by recognizing that we really are impatient to see the completion of the project. But frankly speaking, this is the government that has tried to do it the right way. I don't know that anybody else has. And when the history would have been written, maybe not now, and the context is placed on the table, you recognize that Cornwall Regional had an air quality issue probably a decade before it collapsed, and nobody did anything about it. They went in, they pull out this, and they add a little band-aid here. The base of the hospital was compromised to the point where, God forbid, a catastrophe could have taken place. We had to reinforce that. We had to take out the boiler system in the middle of the building. We had to deal with all the steel work that was protruding at various levels of the floors and so on. So what we have done is an entire stripping down of the hospital, the building, literally to nothing, taking out all the pipes, the electrical, the roof has to be changed, and I could go on and on. Covered areas that were not covered, so we created greater levels of square footage space. And we are now in the stages of essentially building a new hospital. And I'm not going to not say it any other way, because that's what we're doing. The only remaining thing that will be there when we open Cornwall Regional is the 10 floors. This 10-story concrete structure will be the only consistent physical part of the building. And indeed, it has undergone substantial transformation, because we had to go floor by floor to reinforce. Now, I want to clear up a couple of misperceptions, again, because repetition is good. Firstly, to date, we have spent 3.5 billion, as said on the screen. This year, we're projected to spend 5.81. And that's because this year, and it has started, we're now putting in the internals of the building. All the designs are complete, so we have, this is how the operating theaters are going to look. We have 5 brand new operating theaters that are going in there, 5, right? This is how the waiting area will look, A&E will look, the wards will look. All of those designs, and we had to do new designs, because the new designs, because there was a shell, there was nothing. It's just the building, and the entire floor was empty. And the team, led by the project manager and the Office of the PS and others, and the contractor, and all the associated stakeholders are busy, including the technical medical staff at Cornwall, have now signed off, and we are now getting to that point where you will see floor by floor being reopened. This cannot be considered a cost overrun. And by any definition, those who want to know just need to check the dictionary probably, or ask an expert what overrun mean from rescoping. Because when it was a ventilation system, there was a cost related to a ventilation system. When it became taking out the broiler, reinforcing the base, taking out every window and every door, dismantling every whole operating theater, removing all the debris, taking out parts of the building that they say had asbestos or something, right? One section. It had to be rescoped. Rescoped. Cannot be considered a cost overrun. right? And hence the new cost associated. Now, we could have decided, the government, that tell you what, just put in the new ventilation system, and when it breaks down again, next time, mold or whatever, we just have to move out people or inconvenience people. We decided not to do it. I believe, and I'm, self-praise is no recommendation. It's not up to me alone. It's a cabinet. We were bold in taking a decision that we were going to solve the problem once and for all. And it took guts to do that. But it also took a lot of work, because what we did, having taken that decision based on the recommendations of the experts, we had to create a hospital around the hospital, which is the other misconception about the 21 billion and its expenditure. First of all, we haven't spent 21 yet. It's a projection, okay? Secondly, it involved a plan. It was a parallel plan. One was to strip the main building down, to restore it as a modern building. Every single thing in that building will be new when it's finished. Every equipment, every diagnostic, every tool, everything. And the second, which was more important at the time, was what do we do with the 450 people who were in beds in the hospital when the thing was collapsing? What do you do with the 500 patients each day who came in as outpatients to see a doctor because they had a massive outpatient service? What do you do with the dozens of people who have heart attacks, gunshot wounds, car accident, who came to accident and emergency every single day, 24/7? A hospital is an essential service for those who don't know. And I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 12 months of the year service. You can't just stop it and wait until you build a new one. If it worked like that, then we probably would have had a renovated Cornwall 2 years after. But let's face it, we had to kind of go along, build out a structure around the structure, which meant bringing in Noel Homes in Hanover, Falmouth Hospital in Trelawney, building out 2 additional operating theaters, for example, in Trelawney, renovating buildings, shutting down the Mount Salem Clinic, which is on the compound, converting it into an A&E, doubling the capacity, building a new diagnostic center, taking out all the nurses, some of them had to be relocated, converting the nurses' quarters into inpatient wards. So we had to go in there, and you don't just take out the nurse them and put patient in the ward. You have to put in plugs, to put in ventilators and piping and for oxygen, dialysis, creating a new dialysis center. It really is a case study on how to manage a crisis. And I am of the view, contrary to many people, that it is nothing short of heroic what the team has done, those on the ground at Cornwall, to maintain a service while dismantling a main building. And it costs money. So some of the 21 billion, the 3.5, not the 21, the 3.5 that was spent on Noel Homes, Falmouth, and building out all of these services around the hospital. And it was done because it had to be done. Otherwise, we'd have to put 450 people on the road. And clearly, that's not practical, and that certainly would not be an option for the government of the day. So when we speak about Cornwall in this kind of disparaging way, it is an insult, I believe, to the people who have been involved in the process, the doctors and the nurses. It is an attempt at discrediting the government. The government is not, well, let me not say the government. I am not devoid of criticisms, because there are some things we could have done differently. If in 2020 vision, we went through several project managers. We started with the UDC, then we moved to UNOPS, we went overseas, because we never had any experience in hospital build-out. So went to the United Nations hospital system. They changed about 3 project managers during the time. because it wasn't working. Then we had COVID, so literally the project stopped for 2 years or more because nobody was going on a building during that period of time. Then we had to wait and build out parts to move people in. So we had to keep people in the building that was limping and then move them out as we built out. It is a classic case of case management and around crisis, but it's also an example of what a position not to get into and why maintenance of our infrastructure is important, which is why every new infrastructure we're building now, we are including in that a maintenance schedule or a service level agreement that is going to require routine maintenance. So we never get back to the Cornwall regional debacle. But it is unfair to say that the team has not done their best under the circumstances. And I think it's unrealistic for those who make claims around expenditure to misunderstand, misinterpret, or create mischief that somehow the 21 billion, which is yet to be spent, is because of cost overruns. It is rescoping, and rightfully so. I see the minister waiting on me to sit down, so I'm passionate about this one. And you notice I've looked at the script, right? I kind of know it by heart now. So where are we going with Cornwall? This year, we're going to see significant work on the internals, both that and Western Child. And the intention is to phase the reopening, which hopefully will mean occupation or reoccupation of the building over time. And yes, it will go into next year, but we're going to do it right. In the meantime, there is no Jamaican or foreigner for that matter who goes to Cornwall Regional for a service who does not get that service because once it's offered there. Emergency or otherwise. So we should make a distinction between the service provision and the main building. We haven't deprived anybody. People may have to wait, but we're not depriving anybody. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask the people of Western Jamaica and others who may be anxious to recognize that I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong, of any project in Jamaica and maybe in the Caribbean where you have an active hospital compound that sees thousands of people every week and 2 active construction sites on the same compound. We have a massive construction site for Cornwall. We have a massive construction site for Western Child and Adolescent. Workmen, cranes, trucks, things going in and going out, and we're pushing people in trolleys and on stretchers and carrying them from one space to the next. And we haven't really suffered any major fallout in terms of infection issues and so on. I'm telling you, the people on the ground should be seen as heroes as opposed to villains. And I'm not saying me. You can make me be the villain. I don't have a problem with that. I know what I have to do, and we're pressing ahead. But the people there, you know, the community should be treating them in a special way because they put up with all of that. Noise pollution, dust pollution, all of those risks, and they have had to manage that. And I salute them, and I will continue to do so now and in the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that may be it. There wasn't any other sliding, no? Yeah, but we don't, yeah, Western Child and so on, all of those are there. So I want to just conclude. I know KPH has been talked about. We're putting in place a project team for KPH because we worry about KPH suffering the same fate as Cornwall. It's a 240-plus year facility. And we're spending some money this year on KPH. But the cabinet has said we should explore the construction of a new KPH. It's not a short-term thing. Let me just state that clearly. Nobody should ask us next year if we're breaking ground next year. I want to just clarify that. It is the start of a process that may go on for a few years because to build a new KPH means managing patients while building a new hospital. So it has implications for land. So we're going to have to look at the land in and around there and how we access additional lands. It has implications for rescoping. So we're going to have to deal with that. But while we're doing that, KPH has major issues, electrical issues and so on. So this year we're spending 300 million. It will not stop us ensuring that the services will continue. And that's very important. Thank you very much.
Minister, do not escape us yet. I want you to clarify firstly that you're not building a new Kingston public hospital. You're building a hospital to replace the Kingston Public Hospital. I'm sorry, I had to.
Okay.
There was conversation that where are we going to find land in New Kingston to build a hospital?
In New Kingston? I didn't say anything about New
said.
Kingston. Okay.
So I want you to be very clear.
Okay, yeah. No, it's not a New Kingston endeavor. It has to be in and around the same vicinity where KPH is. But it has implications for land provisions and so on.
All right, Naomi, before Minister escapes, I know that he has an engagement in Spanish Town. I think we're building that new hospital.
Right,
we're adding to the Spanish Town Hospital. I would love for you to open the floor to members of the media who may wish to engage him with questions.
Thank you so much, ministers, and good morning. I'm sure that later on we'll also have an update on the construction of the new Spanish Town Hospital as well. Many of us were born there, right? So I do have a few questions online as well, and we do have our media representatives here with us at the banquet hall. Good morning to you. May I just take the liberty then to start off with one from IRA FM, who's actually not here. And Minister, they've asked about the heat. So the question is, reports are that children are fainting due to extreme heat. Has the ministry seen an influx of persons presenting at health facilities with heat or stress-related issues? And are the facilities able to meet the demands? With the summer set to begin, what will the ministry do to inform citizens about heat-related illnesses, prevention, and treatment?
Right, so the CMO is here, but I believe I would have been notified if there were any unusual demands on the system as it relates to heat-related issues. I have not been. I don't know. So we haven't seen or heard of any of that. But we do take note that the heat is an issue and will become an issue. And normally we would issue an advisory. We did. So an advisory is out. I haven't seen it as yet. But there are basic things that you do. I was talking to some students yesterday, telling them that they need to avoid direct exposure to the sun as best as possible and critically rehydrate. Drink and rehydrate with water, not with sugary drink. And that is a kind of standard response.
Thank you, Minister. Let me go to Ms. Small from the Gleaner.
Good morning, Ministers. Sashana Small from the Gleaner. Minister, what is the Ministry's position on the AstraZeneca vaccine? Is it still being administered?
Right. So we anticipated that question. And as a result, I'm going to ask the CMO to take the mic and to give her clinical response. I can give a policy response after. CMO. Oh.
Hi, morning everyone. Specifically to answer your question, no, we're not administering the AstraZeneca vaccine anymore, simply because it has not been on the market. Okay, and just generally to address the concerns that have been in the public space for a few days. AstraZeneca had released their vaccine from late 2020, and Jamaica started using the vaccine in March 2021. The vaccine had gone through various studies and had proven to be highly effective vaccine, specifically in terms of reducing serious illnesses as well as reducing death. And so the vaccine was widely used early in the response to COVID, and over 3 billion doses were produced worldwide and were provided to persons. It is estimated that over 6 million lives were saved because of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, all medications do have side effects, and very early in the clinical studies that were done, the serious side effects, the rare side effect of blood clots was not discovered at that time. But certainly the process of any new drug being released on the market does not only stop at clinical studies. After the medication is being used, then you have post-market surveillance that continues to assess if there are any effects from the vaccine. And from as early as in the second quarter of 2021, we would have been alerted to the possibility of side effects, including clots associated with AstraZeneca. I remember at the time we had several interviews about it as we sought to reassure the public on the use of the vaccine. This complication is extremely rare, occurring in about 2 per 100,000 persons, where there is an association of the formation of clots. And within that group of persons that can have this effect, then of course you will have a small percentage of persons that will have serious outcomes. And these, side effects are common with all medications. But in response to that, you would have found that there was some decline in the use of AstraZeneca. However, at the time, we always have to weigh the benefits against the risk. And AstraZeneca was a main tool in what we had to respond to COVID at the time. And so the benefits far outweighed the risk that were there of these extremely rare events, and so the vaccine had continued to be marketed. But as the other vaccines became more available, the RNA vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine, Moderna, then of course in many countries you had a decline in the use of AstraZeneca. And also in continuing the manufacture of vaccines, you would have found that the other vaccine manufacturers had developed new vaccines against the new variants that were coming on, and AstraZeneca did not. It's simply a matter that the technology that was used for the production of AstraZeneca does not lend itself to so much manipulation, which is the viral vector technology. But the other vaccines the other manufacturers would have moved ahead with producing new vaccines. And of course, as those became more available, there was even further decline in the use of AstraZeneca. And so therefore, the production, the manufacture and supply of AstraZeneca decreased, and it had stopped being produced. The UK Vaxzevria, they stopped producing that in 2022, and the Covishield was stopped being produced by Serum Institute of India in December 2022 as well. So, sorry, 2021. Okay, the vaccines, they had stopped producing them. So there was demand, the demand had decreased substantially, and so it is understandable that the manufacturer would start withdrawing the licenses that exist. So in Jamaica, we continue to vaccinate against COVID, following the WHO guidance in terms of boosters that are available. And since July 2022, that is when our last dose of AstraZeneca, the set that we had expired, we have not been offering AstraZeneca anymore. The side effects I know that persons are concerned about tend to happen between 3 days to 3 months. So some persons are wondering, if I had received AstraZeneca then in 2021 and early 2022, am I still going to have this possibility of these side effects? And the answer is no. The likelihood of developing those side effects, 3 days to 3 months. Okay, so I know that's something that persons are worried about. And as I said, the ministry still continues to collect information on persons who think they may have suffered side effects, and we investigate them to see if they are in fact related to the vaccine.
So can I summarize, because I think the clinical perspective requires clarity sometimes on what is most concerning to people. So essentially, and this is not to devalue the concerns that may be there, all medication comes with side effects, including vaccines. You only need to watch those commercials on American TV when they introduce drugs, and then they start to talk fast and tell you all the side effects that are there, right? 100 different side effects. We only use vaccines in Jamaica as a policy that was subjected to very stringent validation. In fact, there were debates at times that we should embrace vaccines, whether from other jurisdictions, some of them friendly jurisdictions, Cuba, for example, even China initially, that were not approved by the WHO's validation committee, and we never did. So I heard you talk about Cuba and why we didn't take Cuban vaccines. We are very friendly with the Cubans, of course. We benefited a lot from their personnel, which we appreciate, but we never embraced the vaccines because they were not approved at that level. And the same for other jurisdictions. So we were comfortable with the risk that would normally be applied based on that validation. And so that vaccine was available. Remember the context, vaccines were short and we embraced. As CMO said, the vaccine was known to come with side effects in a very small percentage of times, and that those side effects would be most noted within 3 months of taking the vaccine. And I'm looking here on the report, which CMO may not have mentioned, that there are no reports to date of any cases in Jamaica of persons, Jamaicans, suffering that side effect, that rare side effect involving the AstraZeneca. So we have clinically on record no report of. And those who would have taken would be highly unlikely, if not impossible, to have that side effect now, years after taking the vaccine, and we no longer are distributing the vaccine. So I think that's clear. I believe too that when AstraZeneca sent out the notification, it was a notification to discontinue production. And there seemed to have been some interpretation or extreme interpretation that it was a notification based on a recognition, maybe, that the vaccine somehow was going to, create an adverse reaction to people who have taken it, how many millions of persons who have taken it. And I think it has been, the dialogue around it in the country, and unfortunately some have sort of exaggerated it. We do have an environment now where the anti-vax movement is big, an environment where the political climate is somewhat toxic, and so sometimes we got interpretations around this that created an extreme view. And I think it's unfortunate because it's not our intention to make the public panic around these issues. But I believe we'll continue to monitor it, and the CMO will be the lead spokesperson on that because it is a major clinical matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. Naomi, do we have another question?
Yes, we have 2 more for Minister, including one from Arthur Hall, but I'm just recognizing the fact that IRFM asked questions related to that. Minister, you have answered in terms of any numbers of persons who might have been impacted. None?
None on record.
As you're saying, and therefore the issue of compensation is negligible because there is none. Arthur, you still have your question? All right, well, okay. There is one question that came in from Ms. Maitland, who is normally here from TBJ, not here today. Please ask Minister Tufton about the extent to which the ministry is involved or has knowledge of any breakouts of any health disease in lockups or correctional centers. Are there assigned health professionals there, and are they enough?
I am not aware of any. Are you aware of any? Not since the 1 month ago. Huh? A few weeks ago. But we do have a strong relationship with the penal institutions, and we provide support wherever there is an issue. We normally send in the team. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister. I want to thank Minister Tufton and his team, the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Biseso, as well as your support team. I'm going to ask, I know that you have a prior engagement, but I'm going to ask members of the team who can stay if they would be willing to stay, as we have a special guest who is actually here to also make a presentation. But before that, okay, well,
Minister,
the special guest is here.
Indeed, he is.
Prime Minister has decided to join us at post-cabinet. He is on his way through that door. He'll be speaking on constitutional matters, and he will also be joined by the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. And Minister, you can.
Which one do I stand at? This one? I thought I would just stop by for a few minutes. I have a 10 o'clock appointment. But having regard to matters that seem to have captured extensively the public's attention, which it rightfully should, the matter of constitutional reform and Jamaica becoming a republic, and the opposition indicating that they will not sign the CRC report, I believe it is important for me to even make a few statements on the matter. I have deliberately, during the entire course of this action, refrained from making any statements lest it be construed politically and used as an excuse to derail the process. But I believe that there should be some context added to the public conversation. It is not so long ago that Jamaica entered into celebrations for its 60th year of independence. Coming out of this, there were many calls for Jamaica to proceed on the path of becoming a republic. Calls made by prominent members of the opposition as well as other prominent members of the society. As Prime Minister, at the time of Jamaica's celebration of its 60th year, it found favor with my own thinking that this should be the case. We contemplated the work that was already undertaken some 25 or 26 years ago, very detailed, extensive work, but by the passage of time, dated. There might be a different point of view, a different perspective with the current generations. And therefore, we thought it best to put in place a review committee. We named the committee. You will recall as well that the leader of the opposition took a different view. His view was that the work of the committee was sufficient. We could have proceeded on it without, that is the parliamentary committee that worked before, without putting in place a new committee to review. That was the view. We considered his perspective and thought that so much has changed since the work that was done by the parliamentary committee over 25 years ago, that it really should be refreshed. New perspectives ought to be brought in, and therefore we put together the review committee. You will also recall that he declined to name the members to the review commission. Declined and delayed for several months. We ended up having a meeting under the auspices of the Vale Royal talks. I thought those were good meetings, and we came to an understanding that the process would be a phased process, that we would move on the matters on which we agreed, which would be the Jamaica becoming a republic, and the other matters that were a little bit more complex, on which consensus ought to be fully realized, that those would come in the second phase of the process. As a result of that meeting, that is the Vale Royal talks, the leader of the opposition agreed to name members to the CRC. And as a result of that, we moved forward with the review. So we had I would say, reasonable expectation that we are proceeding in good faith. The second issue raised from the appointment of the CRC was the breadth and depth of consultations. And you would recall that there were some issues about the membership, and we reviewed that, and we extended the process of consultation to include island-wide consultation and specific interest group consultation. So my own view on it is that the CRC, the Constitutional Reform Committee, Review Committee, they have done quite an extensive job in conducting the review and taking into account the opinions and views that are widespread in the country. At this juncture, I would like to thank the members of the CRC for the work that they have put in. I happen to know that many of them would have sacrificed their own private endeavors and affairs in order to pursue this matter because it is of such grave national importance. And therefore, I would like to thank them all for their time and effort that they have spent. So, my initial assessment of the response of the opposition is that I am disappointed, but I am not surprised. I'm not surprised that they would have tried to find every way out of seeing this process through to its rightful conclusion. I would like to say to the Jamaican people that the efforts that the government has made is not in vain, that we will continue to pursue consensus, because the truth is that you cannot disturb the constitutional and governance architecture of the country without consensus. That is the reality. And consensus takes time, and it takes effort. So I speak to you today as Prime Minister of the country, not as leader of a political party seeking power, but as someone who is genuinely interested in the advance of our country. And so I want to assure Jamaicans that the process continues. We are in a certain season described by others as silly. I tend to sometimes agree. But we will get over it, and Jamaica will evolve into its rightful form, constitutionally, governance, in terms of our economic independence, and socially. The journey continues. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
As well governed as any in medieval Europe itself. What is more, the reports of traders and diplomats who visited these kingdoms assumed no attitudes of racial superiority. Racism, in fact, is a rather modern sickness. Nothing more clearly illustrates the change that was to come than the European art of the Renaissance, and earlier still. White and black take their place in these paintings with equal dignity. There's no hint here of what a later world was to call human nature in its crudest state. And this acceptance of equality between black and white had also been a keynote of the Middle Ages. Among the revered saints of Central Europe was the black martyr, St. Maurice. As we shall see, he's one of the heroes of this story. What then was the cause of this enormous change in white attitudes from equality to racist prejudice? History gives one dominating reply: the Atlantic trade in slaves. Based in strong castles on the West African coast, the nations of Europe vied with each other in the massive removal of millions of captured men and women. Their guns were not pointed at Africa, which was seldom regarded as a source of danger, but out to sea, ready to face rival ships suddenly appearing over the horizon. Africans, of course, have not been the only victims of racism and color prejudice. But if, as I believe, they've suffered more acutely than the other peoples of the world, the reason lies here. For over 300 years, this magnificent coast was the scene of organized and systematic cruelty. Year after year, black people were dragged from their homes into the white man's world of misery and degradation. They were presented as less than human, objects for buying and selling, like cattle, against whom any act of violence and debasement was justified. Wherever the slave trade spread its ruin, the stability and fabric of African life were destroyed. But something else was also destroyed, and that was the mutual respect which had previously existed between white and black. But after all, the slave trade ended a long time ago. Surely it's time to think again. Those old ideas about black inferiority were completely wrong, without foundation. As it happens, modern science has given us a vast fund of new and reliable knowledge which shows that the black peoples do indeed have a history of their own, as rich and strange, as long and sometimes surprising as any major branch of the human family. On the high plateau of Central Africa, in what is now modern Zimbabwe, stand the Matopo Hills. Large numbers of leopards inhabit these rock formations, which in their strange mystery and shape seem to take us back to the carvings of ancient African history. To the people of this region, this unearthly landscape has always been a sacred place, and still is to this day. Tucked away in these Matopo hills, there are messages from the very dawn of history. This is the Nswatugi Cave, one of the many rock shelters in the Matopos that were decorated by the people who lived here in ancient times. These truly marvelous rock paintings were inspired by motives that we don't know. Probably there was a variety of motives, as with all great art. Those distant peoples who faced the wild wilderness of primeval Africa must surely have felt the need for psychological and spiritual reassurance, as well as for magic to safeguard their cattle. And their artists of long ago clearly loved to portray the animals they knew. The land was ideally suited by its climate for man and beast to prosper. And even today, perhaps 3,000 or 4,000 years later, it's easy to recognize duiker, kudu, antelope, and giraffe. The arid wilderness of the Great Sahara, 3,000 miles to the north, could hardly be in greater contrast. Yet here in the 1950s, even more surprising evidence was found of early African history. Today the place belongs to the creatures of the desert, lizards, scorpions, and snakes that can survive the searing temperatures of this thirsty land, one of the driest and most desolate regions on Earth. Water is the rarest and most precious commodity. Yet even here it must once have flowed in abundance. The revelation of these rock paintings in the Tassili Mountains of the Algerian Sahara just 30 years ago astonished the world. Whole communities of people who were obviously African in origin had created marvelous galleries of ancient art depicting most vividly the life of the Green Sahara, as it must once have been. First we see hunting folk and the animals they lived among. The clearest proof that this region of the Sahara long ago teemed with wild game. The earliest paintings may be 7,000 or 8,000 years old. But not all the people who inhabited this huge region were nomadic hunters. This horse, complete with saddle and bridle, points to the development of transport systems and traders. And this ox-drawn plough to the planting and growing of crops. Whether for war or sport, elaborate chariots came into use, while the clothing of these people bears a striking resemblance to the tunics of ancient Egypt. The evidence of these paintings suggests a continuous community of peoples living right across the Sahara, from the Atlantic to the valley of the Nile. Then, some 4,500 years ago, the climate began to undergo a disastrous change. Gradually, the Sahara lost its rainfall, its animal life, and finally, its people. Abandoning their increasingly arid pastures, more and more people